As ceremonies are underway in Iran to mark the second anniversary of the U.S. assassination of the country's top commander, Lieutenant General Qassem Soleimani, and senior Iraqi commander Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the world is realizing more and more what this martyr stood for. Iran will never forget the U.S. and Israeli crimes in this assassination and has urged the UN Security Council to hold both responsible for this crime. This edition of the Spotlight, we will look at the significance of Martyr Soleimani and his impact on the world stage.
2 years on since the U.S.'s assassination of top Iranian military commander Lieutenant General Qassem Soleimani made headlines, and Iranians still grieve his loss. On the second anniversary of the incident, thousands gathered at Tehran's Grand Mausoleum to pay tribute to him. Addressing the gathering, Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi vowed to bring those behind the incident to justice.
If Trump and Pompeo are not tried in a fair court for the criminal act of assassinating Lieutenant Soleimani, Muslims will take our martyr's revenge.
General Soleimani was the commander of the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, which is in charge of conducting overseas operations. He, together with commander of Iraq's popular mobilization units, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, was assassinated in January 2020 in a U.S. air raid outside Baghdad International Airport, on a direct order from then U.S. President Donald Trump. Soleimani is well known for dismantling Daesh terrorists in Iraq in 2017. He also spearheaded major operations in Syria that resulted in liberating key areas from Daesh. This made him rise to fame in the region as the mastermind of the fight against terrorism.
Lieutenant Soleimani did not allow the terrorists to approach our borders. We owe our security and stability to his sacrifices.
If it wasn't for Lieutenant General Soleimani, the entire region would have collapsed and fallen under Daesh control. Not only Iranians, but the people of the region are indebted to him.
The U.S. thought in vain that by assassinating Qassem Soleimani, it would stop his fight against terrorism. But in fact, the incident gave rise to a united front in the region against Washington, and that's what led to the humiliating ouster of American troops from the region.
Iran says it is seriously following up on its legal pursuit to prosecute those behind Soleimani's assassination. Iran and Iraq have recently formed a joint investigation committee comprising judicial experts from both countries. Based on the latest findings of the legal team, more than 120 people have been identified in connection with Soleimani's assassination. Former U.S. President Donald Trump tops the list.
These people say by assassinating General Soleimani, the United States tried to disrupt the regional fight against terrorism. Something which they say put Washington on a confrontational course with the countries in West Asia and marked the beginning of its exit from the region. Yusuf Jalali, Press TV, Tehran.
Our guest joining us for this edition of The Spotlight, journalist and political analyst Elijah Magnier, joins us from Brussels. Also joining us, international human rights lawyer Edward Corrigan, who joins us from London, Ontario. All right, I'd like to welcome you both. And I'd like to first start with you, Edward Corrigan. And the reason why I want to start with you is because I want you to set the stage and tell us the type of crime that has taken place here, or that took place, which led to the assassination of these two martyrs, General Qassem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. Excuse me, because there might be some out there that have been told through various media outlets that this was justified in the words of the U.S., for example. But you tell us the legality of what took place, or the illegality, I should say, of what took place.
Well, in my view, it clearly is an illegal act. In fact, it's much more severe than just an extrajudicial execution, because General Soleimani was there at the invitation of the Iraqi government. It was an official diplomatic mission, and the Americans, assassinated him, but also the deputy leader of the Iraq Popular Mobilization Units, which ostensibly was an ally of the United States in the war against the Islamic State and Daesh. So it's even, politically and legally, this is much worse than just an assassination, which of course is terrible in itself. You're violating the sovereignty of Iraq. And the Iraqi parliament a few days later unanimously adopted a resolution calling for the removal of all American troops from Iraq. So this is, at a very, very high level. You're violating the diplomatic sovereignty of not only Iran, but also Iraq itself, which is, again, it's an ally of the United States. They're fighting the war against Daesh. But it really exposes the fact that the United States and its allies, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and at one time Qatar, were funding this Islamic State against Iraq and against Syria. And, these are our American allies.
Right.
There has been, I can't really think of another assassination, for very few assassinations that's high profile this and have violated as many laws, but also are so politically stupid. The Americans think they're above the law. Right. There's no accountability for them. They can say what they want. There's been no legitimate reason given that I have seen, but for justify the assassination. They said, "Oh, it was a preemptive strike." Well, but this is premeditated murder.
Sure. And
you cannot assassinate, one of the top leaders of Iran and also of Iraq at the same time.
Sure.
So the arrogance of the Americans here is simply incredible. There should be action at the International Criminal Court, also the UN Security Council, but of course it deals with the veto. But they're also calling for the General Assembly of the United Nations to issue a resolution to commemorate this horrific act and to maintain the memory of General Soleimani and of course how he led the fight against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. So
Sure.
He is a very successful military commander, which is why I think the Americans wanted him dead.
Well, yeah, these actions should take place. We're going to get to that. But Elijah Magnier, there's a line here that is very subtle, but yet it's huge in the implications, and that is the way that not only through media spin, Qassem Soleimani, Martyr Qassem Soleimani, is painted not for the hero that he has been, including Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, but also the fact that it was the U.S.'s right, in which Israel also collaborated with the U.S. in its assassination, because they were not a force for the good, fighting the evil Daesh terrorists. And this is given media spin, and they're trying very hard, Western media, to portray a negative image of them. Do you think they were successful? And why is it that they're trying to, so to speak, cover up what they have created in some sense?
Thank you for having me. Of course, they were not successful because the Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi at that time in January 2020 said that Qassem Soleimani was an envoy coming to Iraq to his invitation and to his call for two reasons. First, to mediate between the Americans and Iran, and second, a message between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Secondly, Brigadier General Qassem Soleimani was also an advisor to the Iraqi government, an official advisor, as recognized by Foreign Minister Ibrahim al-Jafari at that time, who asked the support of Iran against ISIS to defeat the terrorist group. So he was an official envoy from a country to another country working against terrorism and counterterrorism. Now, after the assassination and when Donald Trump left office, we heard how he was disappointed that Benjamin Netanyahu dragged him to assassinate General Soleimani and did not go to war against Iran. So it was obvious that Benjamin Netanyahu was acting as the advisor to Donald Trump because Trump was completely incompetent and unaware of the consequences of committing such a crime in a non-lawful way against a sovereign country when the U.S. forces were not supposed to be combat troops in Iraq. Also, there is a big blame on Iraq on different aspects because Soleimani was their guest and was working to support the Iraqi government and the Iraqi sovereignty and to give back the territory that was taken by ISIS. And also, it is up to the Iraqi to defend their guest and their envoy, particularly when this person represents a country that was supporting Iraq for free. Also, it is also the responsibility of the Iraqi to expel the American because they have violated the mandate they are in Iraq for. Secondly, they committed a crime without a consultation with the Iraqi government. Third, they implicated Iraq and Iran into a war on the Iraqi arena, where perhaps they thought Iran is not going to react, and they were disappointed by the Iranian reaction. And also, we saw the parliament that asking the Iraqi forces to leave, the US forces to leave the country, and they did not abide by the parliament resolution with 173 MPs who voted for this to expel all the US forces from the country. So all that is obvious to all the observers and world leaders. So it is no longer possible to hide this crime and to yet add it, as your guest rightly said, to all the unlawful act and crime of the United States.
Sure. Well, people seem to forget, and they have a short memory when it comes down to it, Edward Corrigan. And I'd like to refresh maybe your memory too, I'm sorry to say, but overall, because mine was refreshed, but more to the wider world, in terms of the support that these terrorists were given. There's no denying, there's a fact that Saudi Arabia was directly supporting the terrorist group Jabhat al-Nusra. There's no denying that Israel had been treated injured Daesh terrorists in the Golan Heights. The picture was there, former Prime Minister Netanyahu. There's no denying, New York Times, $1 billion secret CIA war in Syria, which died and was trying to get these terrorists to fight against the democratically elected government of President Assad. So you have the US involved, you have Saudis involved, Israel involved, and yet you have the ones that were fighting them, namely, in this case, Qassem Soleimani martyred, to be assassinated. So where's the justice here?
Well, there's absolutely no justice. It's highly criminal. But it really exposes the role of the United States and its allies, Israel, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, in supporting Daesh and using the Islamic State as a way to destabilize the region and to do damage and to Iraqi society and to try to destroy Syria. The former Qatar Prime Minister, publicly said that that Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates were the main financial supporters behind the Islamic State, and while the Americans pretend to be fighting the Islamic State, a lot of the time they're bombing the Iraqis, Syrians, Hezbollah, even Russian soldiers that were there at the invitation of the Syrian government. So it really boggles the mind that they could do this and think that there was little or no consequences they would have to face. And this around the world, this is seen as a horrific crime. Yet another example of American arrogance and use of violence and assassination to accomplish its political goals. But the American media and the Western media is not really addressing the core issue, which is American support for Daesh, the creation of Al Qaeda, and the funding and arming of Daesh and Islamic State by the United States and Israel, but also its lackeys, the Saudi Arabians and United Arab Emirates. So they still say, oh, we're fighting Daesh, we're fighting the Islamic State. But when you look at the actions of the Americans, who they bomb, who they kill, they have been providing military support, logistical support, communication support, using satellites and everything else to help Daesh fight the democratic elected government of Syria, the democratic elected government of Iraq, and of course, to try to destabilize the region. And this has cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and done untold damage. But even the Americans have spent $2 trillion on this war, and when the only accomplishment that they can count is that they helped destroy Syria and Iraq, and that is simply unconscionable. Well,
let's see what Iran's president has said on this occasion. Elijah Magnier, and I'm going to quote him, two statements that he said. The aggressor and the main assassin, the then President of the U.S., must face justice and retribution. That if Trump and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo are not tried in a fair court for Soleimani's assassination, Muslims will take revenge. What is your interpretation of what he has said?
Well, what Pompeo told us that he lies all the time. Therefore, we can't take anything he say for face value. Also, we see how Pompeo imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Therefore, it is an administration that rebuffs all the law that exists, because they prevent any legal organization, even that was created by the US itself, to condemn the American soldier for their act and the American administration for committed crimes overseas. So, as we all are very much aware today, that this US administration, the previous one and the one before it, and throughout the years, always the administrations did not respect any international law. Now, it is obvious that the Iraqis want to revenge their leader, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, and their guest, Qassem Soleimani, because they were killed in Iraq. And it is up to them to react for this killing and to make sure that the responsible who bragged about it and announced their responsibility will pay the heavy price equivalent to the value of these two commanders, which is a lot. I mean, we're talking about the people who are responsible, who were responsible for defeating ISIS and liberating Iraq and Syria and part of Lebanon, for the support that Soleimani offered to the acts of the resistance to free these three countries from the terrorist organization that General Mike Flynn told his boss, Barack Obama, at that time, that ISIS was growing in Iraq and going to go to Syria, and America decided to close both eyes on this fact.
Indeed. Well, one thing that is in line with what Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi has said, Edward Corrigan, is what Iran's leader actually said. In a sense, it parallels that, in which he said Martyr Soleimani is more dangerous to the enemy than General Soleimani, because the likes of Soleimani will rise in the future. I mean, if you think about what is said there, it poses the question then that this assassination, this targeted killing, as you said, the extrajudicial killing that took place, didn't it in turn jeopardize the national security of Israel in particular in this region, since it was complicit in what the U.S. decided to do, which then, in a sense, mirrors other acts that the U.S. has done in other countries, where it comes back to haunt it?
Well, they think that they're above the law and that they're unaccountable and nobody can touch them. In Israel, there was a book published, I guess, a little over a year ago, which documented 2,000 assassinations that the Mossad conducted. And this is, this is staggering that, that a country would go running around assassinating 2,000 people. The United States has also, and through the CIA and other intelligence agencies, has been involved with numerous assassinations, coups, overthrowing of the government. And, none of this is discussed in the mainstream press in the United States or even Canada, and to a lesser extent in Western Europe. So, there's this, selective blindness, I guess the legal term would be, and a cover-up of all this criminality. But, the United States was funding and arming and supporting Daesh and the Islamic State against the sovereign countries in the Middle East and using it as a way of destabilizing these countries, which is a very, vicious agenda, but ultimately doesn't work. It just creates people, hate and resentment from the peoples of the region. The Iraqi parliament unanimously, called for the removal of U.S. troops, and the general said, okay, we'll leave, but then the Americans backtracked on that, and they still haven't left Iraq. So, they're there in flagrant violation of Iraq's sovereignty, and also at the wishes of the Iraqi government and the Iraqi people.
Sure.
And this is it's really crazy thinking that they think they get away with this, and this somehow is going to help their security interests or Israel's security interests. It's not. It makes things much worse.
Well, Iran's President Elijah Magnier, in conclusion, has said that the most pressing issue for Martyr Soleimani was how to repel the enemy from the region and liberate the region. Do you think that this region will be liberated from, for example, the U.S. and the destruction that it has caused?
Qassem Soleimani is a man who represents an ideology, a mission, a task, and he represents a country. So it is in the constitution of Iran, in its Article 132, to support the oppressed population in the world. The oppressed population have been supported by Iran, and Iran is supporting people who want to liberate their country. Therefore, the assassination of Qassem Soleimani created a school where there are thousands of other Qassem Soleimani who will walk on the same path to support the population who want to liberate their country from the oppressor and the occupation. This is happening in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Venezuela, and any country who wants to push away the US hegemony and the unlawful act of the Americans. So yes, this is a school. The death of Qassem Soleimani is just one event, and there are thousands of others who will continue the same work of Soleimani.
Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. With that, we come to an end for this edition of The Spotlight. And we thank our guest, Elijah Magnier from Brussels, journalist and political analyst. Thank you. And thank you, Edward Corrigan, an international human rights lawyer who spoke to us from London, Ontario. And we thank you for watching this edition of The Spotlight. From Miko Vatav's entire team, it's goodbye until next time.